Hello, my Varieties 1 class, to another session on the language of conversation. We are actually still working on the features of spoken English at the level of vocabulary, diction, and wording. All right. So this session actually is going to be a kind of a continuation to what we started last time. All right. So we last time actually started to and digging actually into the nature of the language of spoken English, and we found out so many characteristics. And one of the characteristics actually that we learned about spoken English is its simplicity, okay, in terms of sentence structure and also in terms of vocabulary. All right, so simple vocabulary, the vocabulary of conversation, is a generally simple, non-technical, and non-specialized because it is easy to understand and common to speakers of English in everyday use. All right, so besides this, it is informal and achieves better social and interpersonal communication. All right, so it's simple because basically everyday language is all about everyday stuff. Okay, so we don't have actually any technical terms or any fancy wording there. That's why it is classified and described as simple. Generally, there is no tendency to complicate communication as the two texts in your course book show. On the contrary, simple words of simple structure, one or two syllables long mostly, it reflects the emphasis on avoiding special terms, formal phraseology, jargon, and any type of specialist vocabulary. Okay? And all this asserts the informality, randomness, and spontaneity of spoken English. Now, this can be said as the stylistic function of all these simple structures, phrases, and simple words and vocabulary, because the stylistic function behind using this is that it suggests a kind of informality, randomness, and spontaneity of spoken English. Characteristic vocabulary. Now, some words and expressions are frequent in conversation and are usually associated with it, characterizing it. Okay, so these words actually are very much associated to the language of everyday, okay? And I'm sure that you all actually use these words when you speak, and I'm using them as well, and maybe when explaining things for you, if you notice. For example, yeah, cause, all right, instead of because, or got instead of I have got, all right, instead of this is correct, a bit, all right, instead of just a little or something, we would always say bit, fed up, sort of, kind of, and so on. The high frequency of such lexical items in spoken English characterizes it from other varieties. We never actually use these characteristic vocabulary in other texts, like in for example journalistic English. We don't use them. In scientific English, in legal documents, in advertising, and so on. So these words emphasize again the characteristics of informality, simplicity, and generality. Now, I want you to focus on this point, filler expressions. Now, maybe the subheading here seems quite misleading. What is that? Filler expressions? I've never heard of this. Okay, once you know them, you will find yourself, head over heels in these words. We all use them extensively, all right? So these are expressions used in the course of conversation to fill in the gaps in utterances, to keep communication flowing, and at the same time to compensate for the speaker's hesitancy, pauses, self-correction, rethinking, reformulating ideas and the structure. Now, maybe you still don't know what are filler expressions. Okay, I'll tell about them. In fact, without these expressions, any piece of spoken English would look poor, and boring to interlocutors. Okay, so these are some examples of filler expressions, or we also call them gap fillers. Such fillers include I mean, you see, you know, they are used extensively by speakers of English. Now, if you like listen to my previous lectures, you would find me like using these words a lot. You know, you see, for example, I mean. Other fillers such as yes, I see, of course, are used by listeners, not by the speakers, by listeners. Why are they used? In order to give their consent to speakers and to keep conversation going on. All right. So speakers usually would say, I mean, you see, you know, and again, these are all filler expressions, and we use them in order, you know, for self-correction, sometimes for hesitancy, sometimes we want to remold our ideas or reformulate the structure of our sentences, so we use them. And the listeners usually use filler expressions such as yes, I see, of course, to show a kind of intimacy as well as consensus with the speakers. Non-specific lexical replacement. What's that? So some words of specific reference are replaced by colloquial words of general reference. I'm sure like maybe this is your first time to know about these words, but these words are so common in spoken English. All right. So for example, thingamy, thingambo. What do you call it? What's his name? Okay, so thingamy, that means actually something unknown. When you find something unknown, thrown, or when you talk about something that is new, not yet labeled, so you would say, what's the thingamy in your hand? Okay, what's the thingamy? Something unknown, and you don't know its name. I would tell you, what's the thingamy in your hand? It means I found something in your hands, holding it. You're holding something. I don't know how to call it. So I would say, what's that thingamabob? Okay, thingamabob. What's that thingamabob that you are holding on your hand? So said for something that doesn't have a label or that you cannot classify it. Okay, so for example, you swimming in the sea and you felt something so special in there, and you would actually come out and say, wow, I found a thingamabob in the sea, something special. What do you call it? We also use it in Arabic. Okay, if you would translate it, you will find yourself, we use it actually in our dialect. What's his name? So all these terms are used to refer to a person, thing, whose name is unknown or temporarily forgotten by the speaker. Now, what's the stylistic function behind using all these words? So, the stylistic function of such pop words is to reflect in precision, informality, and generality of conversation. Colloquial items. These are, or idioms. These are informal popular idioms used widely in spoken English. Okay, so idioms are words or phrases that we use them, okay, for communication. Okay, they are very commonplace. For example, in a minute, I'll be back in a minute. No, this is an idiomatic expression. The simple truth is, okay, so these are some of the phrases and sentences that we all happen to use them. All right. As a matter of fact, as far as I can gather, to get hold of somebody, keep in touch. They achieve a more successful and satisfactory communication and add more flavor to conversation. Catchphrases or cliches, okay, so expressions that are commonplace, popular, and highly repeated in conversation are called catchphrases or cliche. Well, that's life, that's it, it's a deal, forget it. Okay, so these words are cliches, okay, that happen to use them so commonly in our everyday language. The cliches stress the characteristic nature and informality of this variety. They also create an amicable social atmosphere among people. Okay, so they create a kind of amicable social atmosphere among people, that is to say, the speaker and the listener, interlocutors. Now let's move on to euphemisms. Some words and phrases can be impolite or undesired in language, and speakers usually try to avoid them and use acceptable, polite synonyms. These are called euphemisms. They are frequent and preferable in conversation. And here are some examples. Lavatory, sad for toilets. So if you are like in a business meeting and you want to go to the toilet, you have to say this like in front of your colleagues or in front of the employees working for you. This is actually usually impolite and kind of undesirable. So instead of, you would simply say, need to off to the lavatory. Okay, to the lavatory. And also the call, we say it for death. Okay, he responded to the call. Usually, actually, this is very much literary, I have to say, but these examples, I found them in your textbook. Step off, that means to pass away for die. Okay, for example, I'm sorry to tell you that, for example, your neighbor has stepped off yesterday because of a car accident. Alright, so step it off means here died. And also down the line, that means he went to jail or to prison. Okay, your friend went down the line this year. Okay, so it means that your friend went to the prison this year. He went down the line twice this year. He went to twice, okay, to jail. Tiny garments for underwear. Okay, so instead of saying underwear, you would say, where are the tiny garments? You can find them, for example, in the closet next to you. So the function or the stylistic function of using these euphemistic lexical items is to avoid bad, taboo, or unlikable vocabulary, and at the same time to imply a sign of respect for listeners by trying not to insult their feelings by using impolite words. As for emphatic vocabulary, intensifiers, emphatic vocabulary or words or emphasizers are widely used in spoken English. They are usually described as intensifiers or intensifiers, and they used to emphasize something in more detail. For example, very, too much, many, so, absolutely, quite, greatly, surely, certainly, definitely, undoubtedly, tremendously, and terribly. Now, these words have an additional emotive charge in conversation as they imply commitment of the interlocutors to what they say, so they are greatly important in speech. This is your home assignment due next week. Analyze the material on page 68 in terms of the following: characteristic vocabulary, filler expressions, non-specific lexical replacement, colloquial idioms, and catchphrases. See you.